James Franklin has done just about everything to build an elite program and then display it with the results on the field, except we've got this one coming up here in Columbus. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down Penn State football. The best way to do it is to bring in Tim Aiden from Black Shoe Diaries on SB Nation. Tim, how you doing today?
Doing good, Mark. Just enjoying my marathon recovery from what I ran this past Saturday.
Awesome. So how'd it go?
Pretty good. Right around 3.5 hours, which I was shooting for. So, and Penn State got back on the winning track. So overall, it was a pretty good weekend for me.
Yeah, so I caught much of the Indiana game in Happy Valley. It was quite a tussle for both teams. I think Penn State showed that they were the better team, but not substantially. Indiana was in the game most of the way, got down by a couple scores, but put together a touchdown drive to make it very interesting late. And again, Penn State's secondary, despite their defense, I was talking during the offseason consistently about the defense, and I think the defense is extremely good. They do have their areas of concern, and that would probably be the thing that stands out most if you want to go the negative route first against the Hoosiers.
Absolutely. As you may know, Indiana was starting Peyton Ramsey, who used to be the starter and was reduced to the backup role this year after Michael Penix won the starting job. But Penix had gotten injured a couple weeks before against Northwestern, so it was Ramsey once again was a starter, and he certainly lit up that secondary. 31 for 41 passing, 371 yards and a touchdown. And I lost count just how many times receivers got wide open with virtually no blue jerseys surrounding them. And that includes, late in the game, Penn State had gone up 10 points on a 18-play, 9-minute drive, a brilliant drive, by the way, which included a couple of fourth and short conversions. And seemingly with Penn State up 10 with a minute 44 to go, you think, okay, and Indiana's out of timeouts at this point, by the way. So you're thinking, okay, this game's pretty much over. But Indiana gets somehow one of their receivers manages to run behind the entire secondary in what's essentially a prevent defense situation at that point, and ends up catching the ball and gets pushed out of bounds around the 5-yard line. Almost got a touchdown. And to me, that was baffling. And the cameras showed Sean Clifford's reaction on the sideline. He's angrily spiking the Gatorade bottle. And, I think he expressed he spoke for how all Penn State fans felt after seeing that happen. Thankfully, the defense did hold in the red zone, and Indiana ended up kicking a field goal with about 16 seconds left, and in order to give themselves a shot at grabbing an onside kick, which thankfully Jesse Luketa got his hands upon, and that ultimately sealed the game. But it certainly does not bode well seeing the secondary play the way they did going into Columbus this week against a Ohio State passing attack that's just been downright lethal. Now on the positive side of things, Journey Brown once again rushed for over 100 yards on the ground, and he looked very much like what you want to see in your starting tailback. He's really grabbed the reins these last couple weeks, especially with Noah Cain being unavailable due to injury. Now, it's my understanding Cain, based on his Instagram post, he's 100% and should be good to play at Ohio State this week, which is huge. Penn State's going to need all hands on deck if they want to, have a shot at doing the improbable. Sean Clifford, we look at the stats initially, it doesn't jump out at you very much. 11 for 23 for 179 yards and a touchdown. He got sacked a few times, but he did also have some very decisive runs, though, including a lovely 38-yard scramble for a touchdown in the second quarter when Penn State was trailing 14-10. And as it turns out, Penn State would not relinquish the lead after that. So, and he also later on that same 18-play, 9-minute drive I mentioned earlier, there was Penn State found themselves in 4th and goal at the 1-yard line and opted to go for it, of course, which is the right call. And Clifford does a nice fake, does a little bit job of selling the fake handoff to Journey Brown, and then waits for a minute, and then waits for a second, and then just runs in almost untouched, standing up. So it was he had a couple brilliant touchdown runs there. So and KJ Hamler, he unfortunately went out with an injury around the second quarter. Not quite sure what it was. Still, a bit. It sounded like it was maybe a concussion protocol thing because they had taken away his helmet and he was protesting on the sidelines, telling everyone he's okay. But I mean, I understand, safety first. So thankfully, the offense actually was still able to move the ball, and they went a lot more to the ground game, it seemed, after that, either running with Journey or having Sean Clifford, or even the backup quarterback, Will Levis, was brought in to try to truck over people a couple times. And in one case, he did pick up a critical first down on a 4th and 1 on that same 18-play drive I mentioned a couple times already. So it was good to see that without KJ, they were still able to move the ball and score points. But obviously, it sounds like KJ should be good to go for this week, which is huge because Penn State has virtually no chance without him in there, or Pat Fryermuth.
Christmas is coming, folks. Shop Amazon using the link in the description section below. Help us build the channel here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, to continue discussions like this. Best discussion, debate, and analysis anywhere in college football. All right, let's stay with the offense here because I need a few things clarified. So Sean Clifford showed us quite a bit right out of the gate to begin the season, developed quickly, showed us the arm talent, all the things that we talked about in the offseason that you prepped us for in replacing Trace McSorley, that he was going to have a different skill set and more of an NFL-style arm and have that ability, and he's definitely shown us that. The last few weeks against Minnesota and Indiana, I've seen a lot of misfires, and I've seen a few bad decisions lead to some mistakes, and obviously 3 interceptions this past week that was 2 weeks ago against Minnesota with the 3 picks. No picks against Indiana, but you mentioned the 11 for 23. So your thoughts about Sean Clifford, his development, where he stands right now?
And overall, he's fared better than I would have expected. I thought he would have more games like the Minnesota game, earlier in the season, and it didn't turn out to be the case. Now, of course, he's made some, like I said, he's made some baffling decisions as far as, trying to make a play downfield instead of just throwing the ball away. But I'll say one place he's really improved, I think, is being more decisive on his runs. If he senses trouble and just, it doesn't feel like there's anyone open, he won't hesitate to just tuck it and take off and pick up some decent yardage on the ground. I think that's one place where he's really improved from the beginning of the season to the end of it. I think he still could do a little better job with some decision making in the passing game, and I think it's something that's going to come just with more game reps. And he's coming up on finishing a full year as starter, and he'll have another full off season to get even better, to polish up more on some mistakes, get a little stronger, maybe a little faster, so, long term, I'm still pretty high on Sean.
Well, to your point, Tim, he rushed for 55 yards on only 10 carries. I look at the Indiana sack column. They had 3 sacks. So that went against his rushing stats for probably 20 to 30 yards. So we ran for 75 to 85 yards. And a couple touchdowns, including a 38-yarder. So he certainly has added that dimension to his game and certainly did against the Hoosiers. The other intriguing facet of this Penn State offense as it relates to the passing game and certainly contributes to an 11 for 23 day for me is, as you mentioned, KJ Hamler missed much of the game. He still led the team with 52 receiving yards. And the Penn State football I've seen, which is quite a bit, probably 2/3 of the season, KJ Hamler's a stud. We know that he can do. He's one of the best in the game-breaking, game-changing, dynamic players in football. And Pat Fryermuth is going to be an exceptional tight end in the NFL. I think he's that good. He's exceptional. They need somebody to pick up the pieces behind those two guys, another complementary threat to Hamler. Now, they've got a lot of candidates, a lot of guys that came in with big pedigrees in the recruiting process, but who could be that number 2 or 3 guy as a wide receiver that could really be dependable? I see guys dropping passes left and right that need to step in for KJ.
Well, to an extent, we've seen Jahan Dotson come up with some big catches. He's I guess he does have a few drops here and there, not as bad as some of the other receivers who some of us were hoping would step up this year, and Justin Shorter and Daniel George, and they just haven't. I think the Minnesota game was quite evidenced by that, with Shorter dropping a few passes, and also on the first interception, him at 6'4", going up against a 5'10", 5'11" Antoine Winfield Jr. doesn't even try to make a play on the ball, which if he had done so, I'm sure at the very least it would have fallen incomplete. It wouldn't have been picked off. So it's been disappointing in that sense. You'd like to see someone else step up. Should know one of the receivers, Cam Sullivan Brown, has been out with an undisclosed injury for the last several weeks. He's not some dynamic playmaker, but off the bench, he's been a solid possession receiver. And, that's something Penn State could use right now. They seem to lack that solid go-to possession receiver who can just move the chains for you. You may not necessarily need a big play out of him, but just, if it's third down and you just need to move the chain, you can maybe hit him on a little curl route or, quick out, quick in pattern. So they're missing that right now. And of course, Pat Freiermuth, now everyone knows about him. So teams, I think, are focusing more on trying to contain him. But Nick Bowers, the other tight end, has stepped up nicely these past few weeks. He's had back-to-back weeks now of a touchdown catch. He actually caught, Clifford's lone touchdown pass this past weekend against Indiana. And he's a guy he's a fifth-year senior. He's battled injuries his entire career, and I think this is the first year he's really been healthy from beginning to end of the season, and he's finally showing what he's capable of. And and he may he may have a chance at actually getting drafted in the upcoming NFL draft next spring if he continues on the trajectory that he's currently on. So those two, I'd say Bowers, Dotson, and if George or Shorter is they're gonna have any kind of breakout game this year, I mean, this is the week to try and do it. Because like I said, it's gonna need to be an all hands on deck and then some if Penn State's gonna do the improbable.
And you touched upon the running back mix, and that's interesting as well because Ricky Slade's almost become more of a threat through the air. He had an 18-yarder against Indiana, hardly gets any touches from the backfield. Journey Brown has had to step up, and he certainly has, as you outlined. Noah Kane, certainly the guy that's more physical. And then you got Devin Ford as well. What do these guys do and bring to the table? How do you expect them to be used against Ohio State?
Well, at this point, it seems Journey's entrenched. I know the depth chart has a few oars on it between the 4 running backs, but Journey's clearly the starter at this point, as he should be. And I expect Noah Kane, if he's assuming he's 100% like he says he is, to get some carries too. I mean, those two, in my opinion, are the top 2 backs on the team right now. Devin Ford's displayed. He showcased some flashes of brilliance. He actually had a decent, like a 20-yard run against Indiana this past weekend. And of course, he's probably best known for breaking off that 80-yarder against Idaho in the season opener. I mean, I know it's Idaho, but he did show what he's capable of down the road. I just think he needs a full off season to get stronger and faster. And I think he could definitely be firmly in the mix going into 2020. But Ricky Slade has been it's been a disappointing case. I thought he could really break out this year as at the running back slot. He just had it. Doesn't seem to have that. He seems to have lost some of that speed he displayed last year and shiftiness, and he seems to kind of lack awareness sometimes of where his blockers are and how to work off of them. Case in point, against Minnesota a couple weeks ago, Penn State had just cut the deficit. It was early second half. They cut it down to 24-19 and and James Franklin opted to go for 2. And the play was they threw a screen pass to Ricky Slade, and he had a couple. All his guys in front of him were blocking for him, and all he had to do was just cut inside, and he had a clear path to the end zone. But instead, he tries to run around them and ends up going out of bounds, about 2 yards shy of the end zone, and the conversion failed. So it's kind of a lack of awareness of things like that really make it disappointing. Like I said, though, he's had his moments. He had that 18-yard catch against Indiana. He also had a very clutch screen pass against Pitt, which went for about 30, 40 yards, which set up Jordan Stout's Penn school record 57-yard field goal to tie the game at the half. So instead of trailing 10-7, it's tied at 10. And that ultimately made all the difference in that one. And he also had a nice, I think, 40-yard run up the gut against Michigan when they were lighting him up in the first half. But unfortunately, these things have just been few and far in between. And I'm just curious to see what the future holds for him. Some of my colleagues at Black Stripes have speculated he could be a candidate for the transfer portal, which wouldn't surprise me. But we'll see.
Talking to some Penn State fans, obviously catching this, so I'm sure we've got a split between Buckeye fans, Penn State fans, and overall college football fans that just want to lock in on the best game of the week and the most important one across the college football scene. Understand that, Penn State's shown weakness in the secondary the last 2 weeks with Peyton Ramsey hitting them up for 371 through the air the week before. Both Minnesota with their 3-headed monster at running back, they like to run the ball, and they kind of disdained the run at least early until they got a lead, and they took advantage through the air with Tanner Morgan hitting 18 of 20. And Stevie Scott, Indiana, is one of the best running backs in the Big Ten, offensive rookie of the year last year in the conference, and they held him to 54 yards. So it was through the air that Indiana and Minnesota made most of their hay. What's going to be interesting for me to see, in addition to the elite talent Ohio State has on the perimeter, is Ohio State's taken apart a couple teams that had stout rush defenses like Penn State. Michigan State came into that game number 1 in the nation in rush defense, and Ohio State ran right through them for like 300 yards. And then Wisconsin came in, having taken over, I think, the leading rusher, or maybe the number 2 rush defense in the country, and Ohio State rushed for over 300 yards. And now it's going to be another strength on strength with Ohio State multifaceted. They can either run or pass on this Penn State defense that only had 3 tackles for loss against Indiana. So they got to play their best game, obviously, in Columbus.
Well, no question about it, Mark. I'm not sure. I hope Brent Pry and the defensive staff are either emptying that playbook or coming up with some new quirks to try and stymie or slow down this Ohio State juggernaut of an offense enough to give themselves a puncher's chance going into the fourth quarter. Because, like I said, first you got Justin Fields, who is a tremendous 31-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, and he's thrown for over 2,000 yards on the season, and has rushed for nearly 400. And then, of course, you got J.K. Dobbins, who at this point got nearly 1,300 yards on the ground, averaging 7 yards a carry. And, Master Teague behind him is over 700 yards and averages 6.5 yards per carry. So, as good as Penn State's rush defense has been, and, despite the problems they've had defensively the last couple of weeks, those have been mostly in the secondary. The run defense has still been pretty stout, but this is arguably going to be their toughest test yet. And I'm curious to see how well they do containing Dobbins and Teague. That's going to be a very tall order. But if any units up for it, it's that Penn State front 7. My bigger concern, obviously, is with the pass rush. That's been virtually non-existent against winning teams. The D-line didn't get a single sack against Minnesota. And I think they only got one against, off the top of my head, they only got one against Indiana. I mean, Shaka Tony got one, but Yetur Gross-Matos has seemingly disappeared these past couple weeks as far as being that, pass rushing monster that we all hoped that he would become. And So he's got to step up. You like to see Jason Owe. He's more of a pass rush specialist, but he's got to get some pressure there too on Fields. But that's the thing. They're going to have to get Fields out of his comfort zone. I do think the linebackers, especially I think Micah Parsons is going to have a strong game, but he obviously can't do it all on his own. Cam Brown and Jan Johnson will also need to play the best games of their careers. But that pass rush and that secondary especially really concern me. And like I said, Brent Pry is going to need to come up with something to make sure that Chris Olave and KJ Hill and Benjamin Victor, all those guys don't continually get behind them or get or kill them in the middle of the field. I mean, I think Ohio State's going to look to try to kill the slants in the middle of the field. That seems to be Penn State's kryptonite defensively. So, like I said, if Brent Pry is going to be, I'll say if Penn State's able to slow this Buckeye offense down, Brent Pry will have truly earned his salary this week.
We're previewing what should be the game of the year in the Big Ten. Penn State traveling to Columbus to take on Ohio State. Obviously, Ohio State-Michigan has traditionally been the biggest game in the Big Ten. Then there was about a 5-year span from about 2010 to 15 when Michigan State took place, and it was Ohio State, Michigan State battling for Big Ten championships, and Michigan State being the team to derail Ohio State. Now, since 2016, that's been Penn State. 2016, Penn State upsets Ohio State at home. That leads to a Big Ten championship and a resurgence for Penn State after a couple 7 and 6 years. Buckeyes win 2 thrillers in 17 and 18, where they had to come back from double digits down in both games, and that leads to Big Ten championships for Ohio State. And now we have, despite what Vegas says, it is the game that's going to decide the Eastern Division, as Penn State can, despite the loss at Minnesota, tie Ohio State with a win and win the tiebreaker to get back to Indianapolis, with Ohio State right now the number 2 team in the country. Penn State probably going to place in the top 10 when the college football playoff rankings are released, somewhere in that range later. But 19 points, Tim. I understand when you look at the metrics for Ohio State that they're just chewing through everybody, and the points they give up are garbage points for the most part. Last time would have been against Wisconsin, but that they gave up meaningful points. But man, I just can't imagine that. I could see Ohio State winning by 3 touchdowns on a given day, but if they played 10 times, I cannot imagine that Ohio State would average a 19-point win against this team.
Well, sure. I don't. If you play it 10 times, I'm sure there'd be a few instances where Penn State loses by less than 3 touchdowns, or maybe there is that 1 in 10 chance that they do somehow find a way to win. Although
I think at least
I'm kind of struggling to think. Although in fairness, I will say in 2016, I kept telling people Penn State had no chance against Ohio State when I think they were a 3-touchdown underdog going into that. And of course, we all know what happened in 2016. So I won't say they have 0 chance, but I think the chances are very, very slim that they pull out the win. Now, 19 points, I understand where Vegas is coming from on that. If you've seen how leaky the secondary has been for Penn State and how great Ohio State has been throwing the ball, I could certainly see at some point in the game Ohio State going on some huge scoring barrage against that secondary and ultimately winning by 19 or more points. Now, I'm thinking about how it's going to play out, though. I think this game actually stays close for a while. I think going into the third quarter, similar to the Wisconsin game, although I think Penn State's got a little more firepower on offense overall than Wisconsin does. So I think they could keep it closer for a little longer, but I just can't get past how bad the secondary has been, how bad the pass rush has been, and just how many weapons Ohio State has for me to think that Penn State can go in there and win. But if I were to pick right now, I'd say Ohio State by 14 to 21 points.
Okay. Tim, as you interact with Penn State fans on a regular basis, obviously they're at SB Nation. How sick are they of Ohio State? This is the barrier. This is it.
Yeah, well, the last 2 years, talk about sick. I mean, I think, we all collectively wanted to vomit after, 2018 and 2017, blowing double-digit fourth-quarter leads 2 years in a row to lose by a point each time, and then the following week, the following game, they fall flat in their face against a Michigan State team who, by all means, they should have beaten. So it's definitely ruined our seasons the last couple of years. Now in this case, thankfully Penn State plays Rutgers to end the year, so even if they lose like they're likely to this weekend, they'd still finish 10-2. And if certain things shake out, I'll say this: if you're a Penn State fan right now, you should be rooting for Wisconsin to win out, beat Purdue this weekend, beat Minnesota next week, and get to the Big Ten championship game where, if they presumably go up against Ohio State and lose again, they'll have 3 losses and should finish behind Penn State in the final CFP rankings. And Minnesota being 10-2, even though they beat Penn State head to head and have an identical record, it's clear the CFP committee doesn't respect their schedule as much as they respect Penn State's. So I could see Penn State finishing above both of them. So they would be the next highest ranked team in the Big Ten after Ohio State, who would go on to the playoffs. So they would get that Rose Bowl slot. So so the Rose Bowl is very much in play, which if you had told Penn State fans at the beginning of the season that this team was going to win 10 games, go to the Rose Bowl, they would have gladly taken it, because that October stretch with Iowa on the road, Michigan at home, and then at Michigan State, that looked like a pretty daunting late October slate right there, and they got through it undefeated.
Yeah, just make a point about being sick of Ohio State, because since 2016, there have been times when you could argue Wisconsin was the second best team in the Big Ten. At times you could argue Michigan's been the second best team in the Big Ten, but consistently Penn State has been the second best team in the Big Ten. And even in 2016, when you got the job done with the big upset at home, they still got selected for the college football playoff. Then, of course, the last 2 years, you had a double-digit lead that would have sent you to the college football playoff, albeit there needed to be a Big Ten championship game win, not discounting that, but you would have been a substantial favorite in Indianapolis either one of those years. And, of course, they got in the way and pulled off a big comeback. And here we are in year 4, and James Franklin's still trying to get through that barrier, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen because Ohio State's just proven to be that good.
Oh, indeed. And I mean, we'll see how. Obviously, this is year 1 of Ryan Day, and he inherited a very talented team. But it just seems like this program is not skipping a beat. If you look at the recruiting class they're bringing in next year and 2021 and beyond, I will say this though. I think if Day continues if he's able to build upon Urban Meyer's success and say win a national championship either this year or the next couple of years, I can see the NFL come calling for him and make him an offer he can't refuse. Now, of course, I'm sure you'll have coaches falling over each other like teenage girls at a boy band concert to take the Ohio State job if and when that happens. So, I mean, it's not as if they're going to fall off or anything, but I'll be curious to see how things go in year 2, year 3 of the Day era. If there's any sort of opening there for Penn State to break on through. Of course, Penn State's done some pretty good recruiting on its own. Those solid 18 and 19 classes are going to be juniors and sophomores next season. Of course, we'll just see what happens, like with certain people like KJ Ham or Pat Freiermuth, and whether they declare for the draft or not. But I think you have a point. Penn State's consistently been up there as like second, third best team in the Big Ten. And I mean, I don't see that changing anytime soon. Now, whether they can become the best team and take down Ohio State, they're going to have to go and just do it on the field at some point. Not this year, in all likelihood. Then they got to do it maybe next year when they host the whiteout in late October. So we'll see.
It's another round of Ohio State Penn State, biggest game of the year to date in the Big Ten, as it has been for the past few years. Tim Aiden on the line from SB Nation. Please join him at Black Shoe Diaries, covering Penn State football and his official predictions. And there are plenty of preview angles there on SB Nation. Tim, we appreciate you stopping by.
Sure thing, Mark. Thanks for having me.